This is the worst skill in Diablo 2. But I'm gonna try to beat the entire game on Hell difficulty using only Arctic Blast. Some say this challenge is technically impossible. There are some quest-critical cold immune monsters that we cannot skip. But I've got a plan. Let's see if it works. We're gonna defeat every monster in this game with this atrocious level 1 skill. But is it even possible? Oh, Arctic Blast is a level 6 skill. Well, I guess indeed it is impossible. Don't forget to subscribe for more D2 knowledge. Alright, I guess we'll club some demons down until we're level 6. This ain't gonna be the only time we push the limits in this challenge, so buckle those softy belts, kids. These are gonna be the only glory days of battle this build ever has. Alright, here we are, level 6. From this point on, this will be the only skill we can use to kill monsters. But it'll probably be a good idea to put some points into this skill as well. Oak Sage is an incredible companion and boosts our life total substantially. Oh, for fuck's sake, we attracted Griswold. Well, it looks like we have our first cold front confrontation with the highest caliber of competitors. Yep, this is going to be a long challenge. As we were saying, after saving Deckard Cain, I summoned the only pet I will use in this challenge. This is Oakley, the Oak Sage. He gives us a nice boost to our life total when he's around, but unfortunately, he gets bullied a lot. I'm not sure why, but monsters love to rush Oakley and beat the ever-loving piss out of him. That does indeed sound bad, because Oakley is our friend. However, on the bright side, those monsters aren't beating the ever-living piss out of us. So that's kind of a good thing. Because Arctic Blast is really bad. The startup animation for channeling it is painfully slow. It can be affected by faster cast gear, but when we're channeling Arctic Blast, we're stuck in this animation. You can't move around or anything, you're just stuck here. So this just shows how important it is that Oakley eats the aggro. Sorry, bud. Oakley and I decided to farm the tower for some levels, runes, and gear upgrades. Since you can never really be over-prepared on this druid, we reached level 15 in this beginning area before venturing off to fight the first act boss of the game. Oakley managed to distract Andariel quite a bit, but she did close the distance a couple of times, which was a bit scary. However, any significant fight on this build that doesn't take over 10 minutes, kill us, or force us to rage quit shall hereby be known as an easy victory. Unfortunately, the loot from this first boss was nothing impressive. My goal in Act 2 was to run through as much of the act as I could, only stopping for big champion packs of monsters. But there's one area where you can't really do that. In an ironic twist of fate, the maggot lair is actually an exciting place to be for this build. This narrow level has you walking through tiny tunnels, which is super annoying for most builds. But I began to think that this specific level was exactly what this skill was made for. After a very close call against a champion pack of beetles, we hit level 17. This is a very important level, because we get to make the stealth rune word. Look at all that faster shit. We plowed through the maggot lair and snuck our way through the Claw Viper Temple, and got the 2 quest pieces needed for the Herodric Staff. Getting to this point in the game actually took a little over 2 hours, so I ended up calling it there on day 1. But this was the gear that I acquired up until that point. The next day, it was on to the Arcane Sanctuary. Much like the maggot lair, we were built for this. This place is filled with narrow walkways, which perfectly line up monsters for Arctic Blast. We found our way to the Summoner, and I don't know if there's an attack in the game that can't kill this guy in normal, but he was an easy PK as always. After slowly navigating our way through the tombs, we stuffed our Herodric Staff into Tal Rasha's orifice. It was time to face the biggest ball-busting boss in the game. I don't know why this was such a big surprise to me, but I had no idea that Duriel could be frozen by Arctic Blast. Duriel is so dangerous because, for one, he has the Holy Freeze aura, which always freezes your character and slows you down. Secondly, he's extra fast, so those two things combined always make this an intense battle. But Duriel being frozen slows him down too. So now it's just kind of a game of slow motion tag, one where Oakley gets his face caved in repeatedly. And he wasn't the only one. However, this was definitely a fight we could win. And for the first time in human history, Duriel provided some savage loot. Just imagine if this thing rolled elemental skills. It could have easily been an endgame item for us. I'm gonna keep this for a level 18 dueler though, for real. It was time to sail to Act 3. This place is a wide open jungle, pretty much the exact opposite of the Maggot Lair and Arcane Sanctuary. Plus, navigating Act 3 maps alone is usually enough to make me rage quit any challenge I'm doing. The goal in Act 3 is to visit various areas and collect 4 quest pieces. The first 3 quest pieces are in chests, tediously scattered throughout the entire act. The real test for this build was going to be the final quest item. Kalim's Flail is held by a random council member, and you have to defeat them in order to get it. I was a bit worried about our damage output while freeze-drying our foes, but I was able to stand my ground. Although the council member's movement is a bit random, I tried to line them up as much as I could throughout the battle, and they surprisingly gave me a number of opportunities to do this. With all 4 quest pieces in hand, we could now advance to the Durance of Hate for the final showdown with Mephisto. This act boss casts a ton of elemental attacks, and they can be devastating. But that's okay. I fully planned on cheesing this boss. You see, if you carefully navigate to this side of the moat, Mephisto won't ever be able to attack you. As we found out the hard way, the range of Arctic Blast isn't actually very far, and Mephisto can still attack us if we're on the other side of the moat. As it turns out, we were just not strong enough to win this yet. We had reached our first stone wall in this challenge, and we're only in normal difficulty. We decided to take a little detour after our first round with Mephisto. We decided to shop for a teleport staff that would come in handy for the rest of the run, if we make it past this part anyway. I tried returning to Tal Rasha's tombs to level up, but this area is not great for our druid. So I ended up doing temple runs in Act 3, and they gave us some pretty savage experience. After getting some levels and finding very slight upgrades, it was time for round 2. This time I chose a different strategy. I decided to stand toe-to-toe with the Lord of Hatred. When you're this close to him, he's less likely to use skills like Charged Bolt, Blizzard, or Lightning Ball, the 3 most devastating attacks he has. He will melee you more often, which will interrupt our attack, but at least it doesn't immediately kill us. This strategy worked a lot better, but it was crazy to think that the challenge is only gonna get harder from here. Mephisto must have thought we were a Boazon or something, because he certainly dropped a lot of rare bows. We found some nice boot upgrades while gambling with Geed. I don't think we're gonna need an upgrade for a while. We also decided to farm the Countess for runes and make Ancient's Pledge. Probably should have done that before Mephisto. Act 4 is very short, and it's pretty easy to run right to the final boss. This was a pretty decent opportunity to gain some levels and do the Iswal side quests for more skill points. Unfortunately, Iswal is not exactly weak to cold spells. I was very close to level 24, so I decided to fight the council one last time to get there. This was a very important level as well, because now we could finally use our teleport staff that we shopped. This made traversing the treacherous River of Flame quite easy, but it's also going to aid us in traversing maps from here on out. In order to spawn the notorious Lord of Terror, you must defeat his 3 seal bosses first. Luckily, in normal difficulty, none of them are immune to cold spells, so as long as we took our time to clear every looming threat, this wasn't very difficult. It was a bit time consuming. Finally, we took down all seal bosses, and it was time to go toe-to-toe with the Lord of Terror. He does have a couple of dangerous attacks we gotta watch out for. Firestorm, which you basically have to run from in every difficulty, and his infamous Flamer Hose. I don't know the real name for this attack, but you get it. There is a way to cheese this attack in higher difficulties by standing right next to him, but for some reason, that doesn't work in normal difficulty. I think he knew that too, because he kept spamming it for about 5 minutes straight. Spam that B button, Diablo. You and I know it's only a matter of time. As for loot, well, we got better drops from Duriel. Act 5 is another one where you can basically just run to the final boss. Well, kinda. The Ancients guard Mount Ariat, so we have to defeat them first. While I was prepared to pull out some dirty tricks to beat them, turns out we didn't have to do that just yet. They can't spawn with immunities in normal, so as long as I played like a scared little pot-chugging noob, there was no way we could lose this. We made our way to the Worldstone Keep to fight Baal, the final boss. Much like his brother Diablo, there's a number of mini-bosses that you have to get through in order to reach him. Unlike the seal bosses in Act 4, Baal's 5-wave fury is a bit of a steep difficulty curve. The ancients might have failed to force out my cheesy tactics, but these 5 boss waves won't. You see, Baal usually spawns these waves in the throne room as he sits ominously by the portal. But if you do this little dance at the entrance, you can glitch your way past these waves. Basically, you trick the game into thinking you defeated a boss wave when it never actually spawned at all. Time to put on my pro speedrunner hat and try the trickiest speedrunning trick in the game.
Oh, so smart, so thin. Let's go, baby. Three for 3, thin, smart. Fuck.
Well, we fucked up on wave 4 and had to fight it. We might have slow roasted those Venom Lords, but that was a fluke. Time to skip the most difficult 5th and final wave.
Why? Why did I miss that one?
Luckily for us, there's another way to cheese these waves. Baal is very short-sighted. If you kite his waves out of the throne room, he just assumes you defeated them. So that is exactly what I did. As far as Baal could tell, this Arctic Blast Druid was a beast. He'd watched his first 3 boss waves disappear in an instant. He saw us torture wave 4, and he probably still doesn't know what the f happened to wave 5. But he was about to find out for himself as we stepped into the Worldstone Chamber to face off against the Lord of Destruction.
Don't worry, boys, this fight will take a while. This will be quite some time.
It was a surprisingly fast fight, clocking in at only 6 minutes. That's basically light speed for this trash build. And with that, we conquered normal difficulty at level 26. But this quite literally was the easy part. We were gonna need to prepare for what's next. After I conquered an area, I did allow myself to farm that area with other players. So in the spirit of not letting this challenge reach the 2-year mark, we jumped in some pub Baal games like anyone else would do. I was on a Smurf account for this challenge, but also didn't trade or accept any donations of any kind. But that doesn't mean I was gonna hold back from jacking drops in pub games. They don't call me Cooley Quick Hands for nothing.
We gotta make sure we're on top of these drops here too. This is a pub game. Oh, did we get him? We got him! Yes!
The boots we gambled from Geet are actually better. This next difficulty was gonna be a nightmare. Here, After reaching level 43, we had maxed out our 2 most important skills for damage. From here, the rest would go into Oak Sage and the other synergies for Cyclone Armor. The funny thing is, if you reach high enough of a level with this plan, you eventually become a perfectly suitable Tornado Druid, which is a very good build. Arctic Blast is so bad, the game eventually saves you from yourself if you try to build around it, but we're not taking the bait. You can't take the wind out of my Arctic Blast sails, Blizzard. We did indeed sail through Act 1, courtesy of our teleport staff. While these are expensive to repair, if we needed gold, we could just farm normal difficulty and sell every item that dropped. Never said this was a speed run, but it might be a sped run. Alright, I'm done. I found a Wall of the Eyeless on my way to Andariel. It probably isn't better than Ancient's Pledge resistance-wise, but it gave us poison resist and some faster casts, so it's good enough for now. The Andariel fight itself was kinda trivial. At this point, we were significantly overleveled, and Oakley had mastered the art of being a punching bag. That being the case, however, the fight wasn't much more impressive than it was in normal difficulty. But it wouldn't be long before the 17 levels we gained would feel like they didn't matter. Getting the 2 quest pieces in Act 2 requires killing literally 0 monsters, so we didn't waste our breath. Okay, I'm done for real this time. You can also make a joke out of the summoner by skipping past him and going straight to the canyon. But the summoner is the real joke, so no need to do that. It was time to eat some humble pie though, because there's one monster in this entire difficulty who's a big problem.
Looking for Baal.
While Duriel was a tough fight in normal, he gets noticeably harder in Nightmare. Even in normal, Duriel has elevated cold resist, but in Nightmare, we could really feel how bad it was. While I thought we might be able to suffer through this one on account of our level, it wasn't gonna happen. We ended up going back to town and shopping for a wand with lower resistance charges. But even still, this was a tough fight. He one-shots Oakley and immediately aggroes us, to the point where it's hard to even keep Oaksage up while battling him. Not only do we have to keep resurrecting Oakley, but the lower resistance curse from our wand only lasts for a little over 20 seconds, so we have to keep recasting that as well. Also, because of his Holy Freeze aura, it's a good idea to keep casting Cyclone Armor to absorb some of that damage. But the more we're casting all these other skills, the less we're casting Arctic Blast. It should come as no surprise that this fight lasted over 25 minutes. This was the longest fight thus far in the entire challenge. And in the next difficulty, it's only gonna get worse. Not gonna lie, at this point, my druid was suffering from PDSD, post-Duriel sadness and depression. For real, I almost quit the challenge after that fight and took a pretty long break. Maybe this really was impossible. Maybe the dream of beat the game with Arctic Blast only was dead. But one night, I decided to fire it back up. This time, a very special event was happening on Battle.net. This was the 22 Nights of Terror holiday event, and this year, there were a ton of top-tier terror zones all terrorized at once, including Bale. So yeah, after a discouraging fight with Duriel in Nightmare, I decided to return to normal difficulty. Not that leveling or having extra skill points now would do anything, but I needed a change of pace. You're sort of at the mercy of other players in public games, and the first few that I joined were full of leeches. At first I felt annoyed that this druid, who could barely kill Nightmare Duriel, was the biggest source of damage in that game. But in retrospect, it felt good to actually feel like this build mattered and was making progress. Albeit still nothing impressive, the leeches didn't leave, so I guess it could have been worse. Plus, you never know what you could find. I was able to snag these sick War Traveler boots from one Bale run. I don't think I ever actually used them much though, because that Geed gamble was just too good. I also took the opportunity to finish some side quests, namely saving Anya. This would give me more resistances and a random druid item for completing the quest. Also, since Andariel was terrorized, I could run her in normal difficulty, but this druid needed to get back out there. If we were ever gonna finish this challenge, this 22 Nights of Terror event was the perfect opportunity. We needed to get to Hell difficulty as soon as possible, because the kid gloves were coming off. It was time to unleash all kinds of far-fetched fuckery to do this. We started right out with some dirty shit in Act 3.
I will give you the best criminal defense that money can buy.
Saul Goodman is my witness. I guess this is technically allowed by the rules of this challenge, but it felt a little cheesy even by my standards. So I vowed not to do this in Hell difficulty. But here's how I skipped 90% of Act 3. The only critical quest for beating Act 3 is the final one, defeating Mephisto. The game's code will let you advance to the next act without ever completing any of the other quests. You see, in the original game, you had to complete the 5th quest as well, which required you to defeat every council member. However, when D2R came out, the devs switched this to require the player to smash the compelling orb instead. Remember all the quest pieces we had to collect to do that in normal? Yeah, that quest. This was an ironic attempt from the first devs to stop players from skipping Act 3. But now, if you join a game created by someone who completed Act 3, the compelling orb is already smashed, so we can just walk through the entire act to an open door Durance and grab the waypoint. From there, we can make our own game and go straight to Mephisto. Yeah, a little cheesy, but this druid was suffering from PDSD, if you remember. Cut him some slack. To his defense, we could have easily beaten Council and collected all the quest pieces at this point. But again, we vowed not to do this in Hell. Cool little trick, though. Unlike Duriel, Mephisto is actually weak to cold spells. This didn't stop us from having to run back to town for more potions, though. But we did implement the same toe-to-toe strategy we did in normal, and just accepted that boss fights from here on out were going to be long battles of attrition. Act 4 time. His wall surrounded by souls sounds like a good time to teleport through the entirety of Act 4 anyway. Skill points don't help our damage now anyway, and we're certainly not suffering through any more boss or mini-boss battles that we don't have to. Speaking of which, we reached the River of Flame waypoint and made a beeline for Lord Destace. Why seek out the most vicious seal boss and not even clear the sanctuary? Well, I'm glad you asked. This guy can be a run killer. In Nightmare difficulty, he can randomly spawn immune to cold spells, and there's nothing we can do about it at this point in the challenge. So we checked this guy first to make sure that didn't happen. And we were in luck. This guy only spawned with his regular 80% cold resistance. The monsters around him are weak to cold magic, so after clearing the arena, we fired up a freeze-dry fry-off. I know I make this build look so fast and powerful, but don't try this at home. We painstakingly cleared every monster around the seals so they wouldn't interrupt our Arctic blasting of the seal bosses. Eventually, we cleared them all, and it was on to Diablo. Yay, we can cheese his flamer hose now. Oh. Still can't cheese that one, though. I don't know what it is about this guy spamming skills that we can't tank, but he certainly loves doing it. This fight only clocked in at about 6 minutes to take down the namesake villain of the game. It was time for the final act of Nightmare. It did start off rather generously. We found a Colwyn's Point from Eldritch. Items like this with plus to skills on them are the only thing that can increase our damage from here on out. And since there's not really much in it for us to level up and kill monsters at this point, we're gonna skip every encounter we possibly can. Saving Anya kind of fits right into that game plan. We technically don't have to kill anything to save her. If you can avoid the monsters, you just simply have to talk to Anya, talk to Mala, then talk to Anya again. This is good practice for avoiding dangerous encounters and precisely completing only important tasks. Hell difficulty is going to be dominated by that approach. We teleported our way to Mount Ariat, and this is where the challenge really started, in my opinion. In normal, you might recall my mentioning that the ancients weren't yet strong enough for me to have to bust out the cheese strats. Nightmare, however, is a different story. One of the ancients, Korlik, has an attack that makes cheesing this entire fight possible. Leap attack is a barbarian skill, where they leap into the air and smash down on their target. The game creates a placeholder when this skill is cast. That placeholder is an invisible obstruction near the landing point of the spell. This is designed to prevent other objects from moving onto the exact pixel where the barbarian would land. That placeholder is removed when the skill is finished casting. But what if the barbarian never finishes his leap? Well, you guessed it, the placeholder never goes away. Since you can completely restart the Ancients fight by opening a town portal, we can create a ton of these placeholders on the map. And if you do that at this little area of the arena, you can use them to create an unpassable wall. Doing this basically turns them all into sitting ducks. Although Talik managed to somehow get through this barrier, we were able to single him out and fight him fairly while the others just stood there and watched. After he fell, the slow roasting or freeze-drying commenced.
One eternity later.
The Throne of Destruction was an absolute mess, and it all started with this enemy. The Hell Witches in this area have exactly 100 cold resistance, which is the lowest number required for a monster to be immune. We cannot beat these monsters unless we have some really crafty workarounds. Like this. But just because a monster is no longer immune to cold damage doesn't mean that they're weak to it. After this next part, though, I'm surprised I didn't just quit and call it a day. Remember how I looked like a speedrunning pro when I skipped those waves in normal? Yeah, that wasn't the case in Nightmare. We failed to skip almost every wave we attempted to skip, the most problematic of which is Wave 2. The little skeletons that spawn in this wave have massive cold resistance, and they take just about as long to kill as those Hell Witches did. What's worse, though, is that even if you do kill them, the Haradrim Ancients will just resurrect them. We had to lure the skeletons out of the throne room and dispose of them far away from their friends. This wave was an embarrassment. And so was the next one. And the one after that. You know, it's been a tough act when Bale is the easiest part of it. Thanks to our new lower resistance wand, this was actually a faster fight than it had been in normal. I just noticed Bale dropped us all 7s in that gold pile too. Good luck in hell with that shit build. Diablo 2 at its highest difficulty, and it's not going to be easy. There are some seemingly insurmountable obstacles standing in our way, from our toughest Duriel duel of all time to an unbreakably immune quest-critical monster that we have to defeat with only Arctic Blast. But how are we going to pull this off? While we tried to figure it out, we did some nightmare cow runs and found these. 40 faster run walk and resistances. These might actually come in handy for Duriel. But hold up. Why waste time in nightmare cows when we can use the limitations of this challenge to our advantage? We're gonna need to, or else it's already over for us. To do that, we're gonna have to rush through Act 1. So let's just bust out this telestaff and... Alright, here we are. Catacombs level 4. This area can be extremely dangerous in hell, but luckily there aren't many cold immunes here, which is good because we have to clear everything or else the Andariel fight gets all gummed up. Surprisingly, this fight only took about 4 minutes, which is impressively fast for this build. However, this was the final break we were gonna catch in this run. With Andariel conquered, we can now farm anywhere in Act 1. I know. You can't technically open this portal until you've beaten the entire difficulty. Gotta go where the players are. Plus, we're on a fucking Arctic Blast Druid who's about to have his PTSD flashbacks return. I'll allow it. Oh my god, look what we popped from a chest on our very first run. I honestly had no idea what to do with this. But after assessing some options on the R8 Summit website, we discovered this. The 1.11 patch rune word rain is something I don't think I've ever made in my entire life. But I think we finally found a use case. No, it didn't take me 6 whole days to muster up this pathetic gear. What do you think I am, a noob? Let's move on to Act 2. This was the final time we would need to collect these quest pieces. But man, are these places way scarier in hell. We stuck to the game plan. Even though we'd found some new armor, we were still on a very weak druid build. So we were dodging confrontation at every turn. This time, we even skipped the summoner. So I guess he got the last laugh. Game time. The duel with Duriel was imminent. In Nightmare, this almost made us quit the entire challenge, and now it was gonna be even harder. Even the monsters surrounding the chamber were demoralizingly difficult. The PTSD was looming. Although this was gonna be a very long fight, we practiced a strategy that would give us the best chance for a swift victory. If Oakley could keep Duriel distracted at a distance, and if we could perfectly time our curse, we could stay far away from Duriel and skip the need to continually recast Cyclone armor. This would give us the most amount of time possible to cook Duriel with Arctic Blast while he's sort of stuck in one spot. But after all he's been through, how many more times would Oakley be willing to sacrifice himself and dive in front of the most dangerous monster just to buy us some time? No matter the outcome, this would be our final fight with Duriel. After an 11-minute fight, the most difficult boss in this entire challenge was defeated. We marched to Kurast with newfound confidence, and even got the opportunity to personally thank Natalia for those boots. If we could beat Duriel, nothing in this place could stop us. For fuck's sake. With the wind at our backs, trudging through tedious Act 3 maps didn't seem so bad. We collected all of the quest pieces for the final time, and while most of them were trivial, the flail was a bit tricky in hell. But we lured one of the council members, Ismail, to this remote location. He couldn't aggro us in this position, and our cyclone armor could absorb the occasional Hydra. We were gonna lure all of the council members here one by one, but luckily, Ismail had the flail. With Khalim's will in hand, we snuck past the other council members and broke into the Durance. After grabbing the waypoint, I guess I figured this would be a good time to search for better gear. In case you hadn't noticed, we hadn't really found any decent items besides that armor. At this point, it would be pretty easy to upgrade our damage by finding plus to skills amulets. So we went back to the cow level. And it's a real shame about this amulet, but we did find a slight upgrade. Another item that I knew would be easy to find here was a 4-socket sword. Honestly, I'm surprised we hadn't found one already in the course of this challenge, but finally we were able to make Spirit Sword. We could have spent hours more doing cows, but those are probably some of the best upgrades we're gonna get. So we worked our way to the Durance level 3 to fight Mephisto. We brought back our toe-to-toe fighting style, and we were able to dance with him pretty safely. The hardest part was finding odd corners of the map where other monsters wouldn't join in the fray. Mephisto might be weak to cold magic, but there's a ton of immunes down here, so we did our best to avoid them entirely. But our days of dodging cold immune monsters were about to come to an end. There's been a looming threat haunting this entire challenge from the start. Lord Desace is the real main villain of this story. The Vecna of the Arctic Blast challenge. You might recognize this mini-boss from prior difficulties, but in hell, he's immune to cold damage. And by immune, I mean unbreakably immune. Even if we farmed the best items in the game to rip every ounce of cold resistance away from him that we possibly could, Desace would still have enough to be immune. So I guess that's it, right? There's no way we could solo this guy using only Arctic Blast. Or is there? This is impossible unless you're ready to pull the absolute juck fuckery I'm about to pull. If a player who has beaten Bale creates a game, it could have terror zones active. We can farm a terror zone from previous acts in search of a very specific item that might give us a chance to finish this challenge. We had no choice but to gear up. While I assumed I wouldn't be there long, I was stuck farming the cow level for days. And while searching for the one item to rule them all, we came across some other nice upgrades. I thought farming with other players and having the quickest hands in the land would score us the item we were looking for. But as a druid with a teleport staff, it's kinda hard to keep up. Since I couldn't accept any donations, if someone picked up the item I was looking for in a public game before I did, it was off limits, even if they dropped it back on the ground. At this point, I gained over 20 levels and still hadn't found what I was looking for. Maybe it was better to go off on my own. I was gonna need to farm high-level terror zones solo in order to hoard all of the drops. This wasn't gonna be easy. We needed a terrorized area from an act we'd already conquered that didn't have any natural cold immunes, preferably one that's also not dirty as fuck. And during this event, we had one. Tristram. This was the same place where we casted our first Arctic Blast spell and ran in fear of Griswold. In a poetic twist, the area where it all started was also the final hurdle. Now, we were gonna have to fight through this area in the harshest of conditions, all while defeating monsters at a snail's pace. But with undying commitment, we could do this. We farmed for days in search of the one item that would turn the tide of this challenge. Finally, on the third day of farming, this happened.
Oh my fucking word. Oh my god, come on. Come on! Yes!
Strap in, Oakley. Desace is going down.
we can now play the game.
This is a Sunder Charm, and there's a lot of confusion about what these things actually do. There are 6 different charms that sunder various monster immunities in the game. What that means is that if and only if a monster is immune to that specific element, the Sunder Charm reduces their resistance to 95%. It basically turns them into little Duriels. Even when sundered, immune monsters have a special resistance to curses like lower res and auras like Conviction, which basically reduces the effectiveness of those things by 80%. So even with all the tricks up our sleeve, cold immune monsters still take a while. This made clearing the Chaos Sanctuary, and of course, Lord DeSace, quite time consuming. Don't worry though, we still had plenty of cheese tactics to go around for the rest of the Chaos Sanctuary. The Diablo fight only lasted 3 minutes. This was our best boss fight by far.
I think he's actually easier than DeSace was. Good duel, Diablo.
I was beginning to think that the rest of this challenge was going to be trivial. That was until we got to the next part.
We are the spirits of the Nephilim, the Ancient Ones.
We pulled our nasty trick of trapping the Ancients on Mount Ariat. If it weren't for the demoralizing duel with Duriel and Nightmare, though, this fight would have been the longest one of the challenge, clocking in at a whopping 15 minutes in total. Corlick the Wall Builder took 12 of those minutes alone. Even though he had a Sunder Charm, he spawned immune to cold and cold enchanted, making him extra tanky. We could have respawned the Ancients to try again, as they always spawn with random stats, but with my luck, we'd just get 2 of them immune to cold, so we just decided to deal with it. This fight certainly taxed all of our resources, but we managed to get there, right down to our very last mana potion. It was time for one last attempt at a gear upgrade.
I'm gonna gamble for an FCR ring. What? We're so good at this game. I'm so bad at this game.
We whiffed on skipping the first 2 waves. This left us with a throne room full of problematic skeletons to dispose of, but my pro speedrunner skills were on point for the rest of them.
All right, wave 3 down. Wave 4 down. Wave 5 down? Did I get it? It was hard to tell, I was getting hit. Pro speedrunner.
This bout tied the record for the longest battle in the challenge, and we had come a long way since Nightmare Duriel. Not just with our gear, but also with our tactics. We were level 87 and would be grossly overprepared if we were any other build. But we still had to rely on our combat experience with this final primeval. We removed our Sunder Charm before the fight. Bale does cold damage with his blue wave, and the drawback to wearing the charm is a big hit to your cold resistance. This would mean, however, that the tentacles he summons are unbeatable. As much as possible, we also tried to barricade ourselves next to walls so that his wave wouldn't knock us back. Fighting one copy of Bale is hard enough for this build, but when he summons his clone, we have to despawn it. We do this by going back to town, waiting a while, and coming back. It might seem like a lot to do just for this final battle, and it is, but this build doesn't get much better. We built a decked out version of this Arctic Blast Druid just to test it out in this final fight, and let's just say it was an embarrassment considering how much his gear is worth. But with precision combat combined with the best sidekick in the world, there was nothing that could take this victory from us. And so it came to pass that the shittiest Diablo 2 build beat the game. We might have used some unconventional strategies, but I hope we all had fun. If you don't leave a like on this video, then Oakley will have died for nothing.